Don't you just miss slow news days where there's one story that is trending and one thing to wrap your brain around, your mind around? But no, those days are long gone, and we are living in Trumpistan, you know, the epicenter of evil and hell. And today, not only do we have the House Oversight Committee issuing a subpoena to the Department of Justice, we also have a top official advisor in the Trump administration resigning from his counter terrorism post. And, I don't know, the mention that perhaps Iran and the US were in fact close to a deal, but Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner decided to say fuck it and bend to the will of Israel. This and so much more is jam packed in today's Danielle Moody Show. Folks, buckle up, grab your pets and your plants and your cocktails and your mocktails, because this one fitting to be a doozy. Let's go. Hello, damnation. I am so glad you are all here. It is a jam packed Tuesday, but how else would it be in the downfall of the American empire and the rise of a new axis of evil that we are at the helm of? But we begin today. We begin today with this breaking news because there's just been breaking news all day. But we begin today with this. House Oversight Chair subpoenas Attorney General Pam Bondi for deposition in Epstein probe. You see, what I love about this headline and this subpoena dropping right now, which is that Donald Trump and his sycophants, his war hawks, and his Israeli lackeys wanted to push him into war for their own ends, whether that be the rapture, whether that be the greater Israel, whether that be the annihilation of Iran, or for others, maybe it be the biggest distraction from the Epstein probe. And what this proves is that regardless of us, edging on World War III, the Epstein file case, the Epstein saga, the Epstein disaster is not going away. And so here, House Oversight Chair James Comer on Tuesday issued a subpoena to Attorney General Pam Bondi to appear before a deposition on April 14th, which is less than a month from now, as part of the panel's Jeffrey Epstein probe. Comer wrote in a subpoena cover letter that his panel is investigating the, quote, possible mismanagement of the federal government's investigation into Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. The committee has questions regarding the Department of Justice's handling of the investigation into Jeffrey Epstein and his associates and its compliance with the Epstein Files Transparency Act, referring to the law passed by Congress last year mandating the justice release the files. And they go on to write this. Separately, the committee announced that Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche are slated to brief members of the panel behind closed doors on Wednesday. A source familiar with the process told CNN that the Justice Department requested it brief the committee on its Epstein investigation and compliance with the law in order to promptly answer lawmakers' questions, given that scheduling a deposition with the committee will take time. Here's what we know, right? We know that in total, there are 6 million files. We know that we've been privy to 3 million of those files. We also know that the Department of Justice did a absolutely abhorrent job in redacting those files, making sure to redact the names of powerful men while exposing the names and addresses of victims. We also know that in their dump that they did over a month ago at this point, that they decided to take down those files that they initially put up and were called out on because people, news outlets, independent reporters have been going through said files and said, there were 3 million and now there are 2 million, 8, bop, 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 bop. Because what was the Department of Justice doing? Going back and essentially doing, I guess, parts of their homework that they forgot to do, which was continue to redact out Donald Trump's name and not include the interview that happened 4 times with his alleged accuser that said that she was raped by Donald Trump when she was 13 years old. And so it's been enough of a back and forth. It's been enough of the Department of Justice's incompetence. And frankly, we know, right? The House and the Senate are both controlled by Republicans, as is the executive branch, as is the corrupt Supreme Court. At the end of the day, though, the Epstein saga has been the basis for MAGA for the longest time. It's where all of their conspiracy theories and theorists came from. They said that as soon as Donald Trump came into office, that he was going to undo the deep state and they were going to get to the center of the Epstein case. Well, what is at the center of the Epstein case is, in fact, Donald Trump, because he is the only person that has mentioned more times in the Epstein files than the files that the man is named after. So here we have now Republicans and Democrats who are on opposite sides on every single issue, because one group believes in democracy and the Constitution, and the other one clearly does not. And so this is a big deal, because this is not a subpoena that Pam Bondi can just say, well, I'm not going to attend. I'm not going to go. No, this is a subpoena that you are required to answer. And if you don't, Congress has the subpoena authority to arrest you. Of course, that has not been used in quite some time. And unfortunately, this would be the regime to do that with. But we know that Democrats are feckless, and we know that Republicans support their daddy. However, what we have seen in previous testimony of Pam Bondi before said committees is the fact that they're willing to throw her under the bus. They're willing to do to Pam Bondi what Donald Trump just did to Kristi Noem. It's always going to be the women who are so happy to tap dance for patriarchy in return for some type of protection or power, only to always be the first ones to go. Isn't that interesting? Of all the people, right, that have had considerable fuck-ups inside of this regime, one would have thought that Hegseth would have gone well before Kristi Noem. I mean, he is the one that opened up the Signal chat. He is the one that has had continual fuck-ups in the eyes of the public, right, and in the eyes of his own Pentagon. But it's always the women. And yet MAGA women just don't get it. They continue to open their selves up. See what I did there? Open themselves up for MAGA time and time again, only to be screwed over. So we will continue to watch that. And as we get closer and closer to the date, I'm sure more content will be released. And speaking of more content with regard to the Epstein trials and case, I want to say this. CNN, in their investigative reporting, put up this story. Epstein's Island, inside the Caribbean fiefdom where he wooed the wealthy and abused girls. I thought, again, this is why I don't do any paywalls, because I think that this is an article that everyone should have been privy to, and not just those that are paying for it, because everyone has some level of investment in the Epstein files. Because do we all want to believe that we live in a nation that is governed by pedophiles and the cruelest people on the planet. That is actually true. And that they can do whatever it is that they want, how they want, when they want, to whom they want. So everyone wants to believe that at some point, justice will actually find not just Jeffrey Epstein, who is supposedly no longer with us, or Ghislaine Maxwell, that is in jail, but actually bring down the syndicate, right? So in this article, that again is a paid article, they write this. The wealthy bankers, political leaders, and prominent academics who visited Jeffrey Epstein's Caribbean island traveled by private jet and spent afternoons scuba diving or riding jet skis. The girls and young women that Epstein shuttled to the island had a drastically different experience. Confiscated passports, extensive sexual abuse, and conditions so dire that at least one said she tried to escape by swimming away. For nearly 2 decades, Little St. James, Epstein's roughly 70-acre island, was the perfect tool for him to both cultivate powerful friends and abuse young women and girls. It offered Epstein both a glamorous setting to attract famous figures and the seclusion he needed to prey on his victims. A CNN review of thousands of emails, photos, videos, and documents from the DOJ files adds critical new details to how Epstein transformed the island into his personal fiefdom, and highlights warning signs of the terrible abuse perpetrated there that some staffers and victims say was happening in plain sight. This is what I think is really critical and important. Because up until this point, right, what we have seen is the arrests and interviewing of parts of Epstein's syndicate that are not in the United States. Those that are in the United States have been able to maybe answer a few questions, but say, I was friends with him, but I didn't really know what was going on. I wasn't privy to what was happening. No, I mean, I went to the island for lunch, but like everything seemed above bar to me. Well, what is actually being conveyed in this investigative reporting is that one of the people that they actually talked to was an interior designer that worked with Jeffrey Epstein and would quit working for him because he was like, it is obvious what he was doing here. It is obvious. He's like, you're walking around this island and you're seeing these weird rooms and these places, and you're looking at these girls and you're knowing, you know, in your gut that something is not right. And so he's like, there is no way for people to have visited this island and think to themselves, everything is fine here. And this is what is being said here. The activities were so obvious and bold that anyone spending any significant time at one of Epstein's residences would have clearly been aware of what was going on, one victim stated in a court document. Those warning signs include photographs of naked young girls on his walls, airport workers who reported Epstein had traveled with girls who appeared underage, and an interior decorator who said he'd been asked to design one of the island's bedrooms with pink furnishings and bunk beds. And like, here's the thing for me. The interior designer in that piece would say to Jeffrey Epstein, when asked to design this room that he would later quit, and say, do you have grandchildren? Like, is this what this is for? And he said, Jeffrey Epstein's response was, no, I don't. This is for the girls. He would be asked to redo another room that was filled with computers, and he would say, what is this room used for? Epstein's reply was that, well, this is where the girls do their work on the computers. It was clear to this man that these girls were being abused, that Jeffrey Epstein was using this island as his own private fiefdom, as they said, to do his abuse without any eyeballs. And the eyeballs that did come there could pretend that the girls seemed happy and fine. And meanwhile, in this report, CNN investigates, they say the girls never spoke. This comes from one of the victims. They never spoke. They were mute, like just looked away, eyes vacant, down. They only spoke if spoken to. No one thought that that was problematic. And the reality is that they knew, they didn't care. They wanted to be in the presence of this millionaire, of this man that was so well connected that they were willing to do whatever and ignore whatever, so long as it didn't disrupt their access to power and luxury. And so this is why I say there are so many people that deserve jail. There are so many people. But we know under this Department of Justice, that is never going to happen. Maybe they'll continue in other countries and continue to bring those people in and open up investigations and what have you. But I say this often. This syndicate did not upend when Jeffrey Epstein was killed. It's still operating. It's just about following the money, following that network, and wondering where they're all going now. But the fact is, why are we being given drips and drabs? Because those people are still in positions of power, are still doing dirt, and are still being protected by the systems that they're a part of. That's why. Then there's this. Tucker Carlson, in an interview with Mike Huckabee, brought up the Epstein files. And I want you to take a listen to Mike Huckabee's response. And the response that a lot of these men in Trump's orbit continue to give, oh, I'm not following that. Oh, I don't really pay attention. Listen to the line of questioning here.
Millions of Epstein files still classified. Why do you think that is?
I have no idea. I haven't kept up with that. I've never met the man. I don't know him.
You haven't kept up with the Epstein disclosure?
I mean, only from a distance. I'm 6,000 miles away from D.C. these days, and I'm pretty sure that there's so much going on.
The current president of Israel, current president, who I know you know, President Herzog,
know him very well,
apparently was at Pedo Island. That's what it says in the disclosures. And of course, we know that the former prime minister, Ehud Barak, was living on and off at Epstein's house. So still living high-level Israeli officials are directly implicated in Epstein's life, if not his crime. So I would think that you'd be following this.
Only I was not aware that there was any connection with President Herzog. I would be surprised to hear that. And I knew there was about the former prime minister, who apparently had a lot of dealings with Epstein.
Business dealings. And by the way, I'm not alleging anything, but I mean, it's in the Epstein files. And I don't know that I've heard the current president of Israel respond to it, but he is listed as a visitor to Pedo Island. So that's kind of a big deal. I wonder, considering there are so many suggestions in the files, as I'm sure you know, of sexual abuse, and given that Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted sex offender, I wonder why the administration you work for would be holding millions of files, which I believe belong to the public, hidden for, quote, national security reasons. What would those national security reasons be, do you think?
Honestly, I think you've probably got more access to the White House sometimes than I do. You should ask them.
Well, but you're the government official representing that White House.
In Israel. And I represent the U.S. in Israel to the Israeli government from the U.S. government. But honestly, nobody has presented that to us.
Well, now that you know that
we have a pretty dynamic situation here. I don't know if you know that or not, but there's a lot going on in this part of the world. And frankly, that has not been top line item
But you're surprised to hear that the current president of Israel, whom you know, is listed as a visitor to Pedo Island.
Had never heard that. Never heard it even in the Israeli press.
Are you going to ask him next time you see him?
I'll be happy to. Talk to him almost every week.
Talk to him almost every week. And of course, Mike Huckabee will absolutely follow up and ask the president of Israel if he is in fact a pedophile, because he has gone to Epstein Island on more than one occasion. What I find, folks, that is really interesting here, and again, we talk about the Epstein case a lot on the Danielle Moody Show, and there's a reason for it, because it's part of the larger syndicate and system through which our government, foreign governments, technocrats, oligarchs have been working in collaboration with each other to create a society where they're able to do whatever it is that they want to do, whether that looks like pedophilia and abuse of young children, whether it's murder, whether it's the advancement of AI without any regulation, whether it's beginning wars, right, that you believe are holy. But what I find really unsettling, I mean, so much is unsettling, but what I find really unsettling about Mike Huckabee, for instance, and this entire pedo ring and just the casualness with which he was like, oh, I don't really know what you're talking about. I have bigger fish to fry, as if a pedophile ring that is inclusive of royalty and political members, academics, scientists, is not something that should concern him, right? They're all pedophiles. That's what is at the core of all of this. You see, their religion, right? White evangelical Christians tell them that men are heads of households, heads of state. Women are essentially incubators. I've said this before. These are people that, when they were politicians in red states, worked to lower the age of consent. These are people who, in Trump's orbit, tried to roll back, and in some cases successfully rolled back, the ability of women to accuse men of rape on college campuses. Betsy DeVos was a big part of rolling that back. Men are falsely accused too often, right? These are people who believe that girls are the property of men. I've heard sitting members of Congress say that I've known people that have been together since they were 12 and are successfully married. What's wrong with that? These are the same people, by the way, that believe that books read at a certain age are more dangerous than the pedophiles that are inside of their church or inside of the Oval Office, for instance. They will conjure up any excuse to deny education, access to contraception, protection, all of these things that are tools to provide women with bodily autonomy. They don't want that. So to them, it's like, what really is pedophilia? I say that like swallowing vomit. Like, to them, there are grayish areas. For us, the land of the sane, you don't sexually abuse children. That's just not a line to be crossed. right? You don't rape women, not a line to be crossed. But if you view girls and women as property of men, then they really don't have any rights that you need to abide by. If a man wants sex, when, where, and however, he should be able to get that. That's what the Huckabees of the world believe. And they want younger women, right? This is the trad wife craze that was funded on TikTok and Instagram by who? Right-wing billionaires to indoctrinate younger generations of women, to stop them from aspiring to higher education and profession, and to say, wouldn't it be easier to just be a trad wife? You take care of the household and the babies and do whatever your husband says, and you'll be taken care of. And that's what they promote. So for them, you listen to the Megyn Kellys who say that, well, Epstein kind of liked the barely legal type, not like 8-year-olds or 9-year-olds, except he was sexually abusing 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds. It's in the files. You see, we don't actually need more files released. We have more information, more evidence than ever. There's just no will to do the prosecution. There's just no desire there because essentially what we're told and what is reinforced over and over again is that this country and the world does not care about women and girls. From religion to toxic ideology, women and girls are property. Their bodies, their movements, all to be controlled by men. So when you think about it that way, you understand then why we're in the place that we're in with these files. Because we realize that there is no value placed on women and girls. They are things. The government looks at them this way. Religion looks at them this way. So do we really think that we're going to allow women and girls to bring down this syndicate that has been running the world? I don't think so. But I think that folks have to understand that this shit goes deeper than Donald Trump. It is about an entire worldview that these men hold in common that is played out through policy that is either passed or rolled back that go to chip away at the rights of women. Because in their world, women should have no rights, not the right to vote, not the right to say no to sex. That once they become of age in the eyes of these men, they're fair game. It's the toxic language that spreads around the manosphere that is all steeped in this faux conservative Christian belief system. So again, when met directly with the fact that it isn't just Donald Trump and Epstein and Prince Andrew and the Sultan and Bill Gates, and it's all of them. Pam Bondi said it herself. If we were to begin to investigate people, it would bring down everything. Yeah, because everything that we know has been touched, led by, designed by these pedophilia men. And when you really start to think about our laws, think about the ways that girls are policed. Think about why women and girls don't come forward when they're sexually assaulted, because we're seeing it play out right in front of us. Mike Huckabee says, oh, we got more important things to deal with than that. Then whether or not, like, Israel was using these pedophiles for blackmail and information on other countries? Really? It's just, folks, it's one of those cases where the more you pull the layers back, the more you unpeel the onion, the stinkier, more disgusting, more vile it all becomes. Because I don't think that those women are ever going to receive justice. Sure, some may have received money, but the money doesn't make them whole again. Doesn't take away the nightmares. It doesn't take away the trauma. Justice would, knowing maybe that this wouldn't continue to happen and happen to other young girls at a different time and just in a different space. But 30 years of this network, and we think that it's just up and done? They all knew. CEOs of banks, doctors, gynecologists, dentists. They all knew. They all participated. And they all are complicit. But like I said at the top, the only person that's in jail is the woman. And if I were her, I would have named names a long time ago, because if I'm going to jail, then everybody's going to jail. But she's still waiting on her pardon, which she may in fact get. Folks, switching gears, and as I do so, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Danielle Moody channel if you're liking what you are hearing. We switch gears to the other breaking news that happened today. Joe Kent, director of National Counterterrorism Center, quit today and said this on social media. After much reflection, I have decided to resign from my position as director of the National Counterterrorism Center effective today. I cannot, in good conscience, support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. It has been an honor serving under POTUS and Gabbard and leading the professionals at NCTC. May God bless America. And he had his letter in which he said this. Early in this administration, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your America First platform and sowed pro-war sentiments to encourage a war with Iran. This echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States, and that should you strike now, there was a clear path to a swift victory. This was a lie and is the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war that cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women. We cannot make this mistake again. As a veteran who deployed to combat 11 times and as a Gold Star husband who lost my beloved wife Shannon in a war manufactured by Israel, I cannot support sending the next generation off to fight and die in a war that serves no benefit to the American people nor justifies the cost of American lives. I pray you will reflect upon what we are doing in Iran and who we are doing it for. The time for bold action is now. You can reverse course and chart a new path for our nation, or you can allow us to slip further toward decline and chaos. You hold the cards. That is what Kent said in his resignation letter. Now, let's get something clear about Joe Kent, shall we? Joe Kent was confirmed as the director of the Counterinterrorism Center, even though he himself had ties to white domestic terrorist organizations and right-wing extremist groups. Now, multiple things can be true at the same time, and this is something that is important for us to understand. Joe Kent is an anti-Semite. Joe Kent is a racist. Joe Kent is not a good person, okay? So I want us to understand that truth. I also want us to understand this. In that message, he actually didn't lie. Israel, under the power of Netanyahu, found the perfect idiot president to persuade with the lies that they've been concocting for the past 40 years about the imminent threat of Iran. He is correct in terms of the American lobby and arm of Israel. Da-da-da-da, AIPAC. That has been successful, wildly successful, in courting both conservative Republicans and Democrats into believing their concocted story of victimhood. Now, why do I say victimhood? Because their defense and strategy in Israel, led by the right-wingers, has been based on the fact that every Muslim poses an immediate threat to their existence. This is not me making this up. I saw it and heard it with my own eyes when I went to Israel and Palestine. Am I a foreign affairs expert? No, I am not. But I did talk to enough members of the Knesset and other workers and nonprofit leaders and activists to really understand the psychology that would have you create an apartheid system that looked at every Palestinian, whether they be in utero or walking down the street, as the fucking enemy that you need to stamp out, whether that be shooting a pregnant woman, which happened right before I arrived at a checkpoint because she was Palestinian, and or committing a total and complete genocide with the help of American resources and money. So is Joe Kent an anti-Semite and a racist and a right-winger? Yes. Yes, he is. So do not applaud that man for his quote-unquote courage to resign. Is what he offered, though, in that resignation letter accurate? Yes. And we knew that information prior to him resigning because there had been other murmurings about how Netanyahu tried with the Biden administration, tried with the Obama administration to get them to go to war on his behalf with Iran. And all of them said no, because they actually listened to the critical intel that they get about the region and the security and economic risks of going to war with a nation of 93 million people. So we understand that. And then this dummy is asked today at a press event, well, what do you think about Joe Kent and his resignation?
Mr. President, your Director of National Counterterrorism, Joe Kent, he just resigned today. He said he can't support your conflict with Iran. What's your reaction to that? And did you?
Well, I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security. I didn't know him well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But when I read his statement, I realized that it's a good thing that he's out, because he said that Iran was not a threat. Iran was a threat. Every country realized what a threat Iran was. The question is whether or not they wanted to do something about it. And many people, many of the greatest military scholars are saying for years that president should have taken out Iran.
Nope, not one political scholar, not one former president. By the way, yesterday, Donald Trump said that he spoke to a former president that absolutely applauded his moves on Iran. And all of the living presidents' offices said to media requests, we haven't been in contact with Donald Trump at all. So the joke going around on social media is that, oh, it was number 47 talking to number 45 in the mirror, maybe, about what a good idea it was to do this. It's not. And then Trump has been lambasting his NATO allies for not taking up his war. And it's incredible what happens when you spend, I don't know, more than a year calling these people weak and saying that you're going to raise tariffs and that they don't pull their weight and yada, yada, yada. You don't even clue them in on the war that you're going to go ahead and start that is going to have, right, create issues for them in their own country. No. But now have the audacity to get on social media talking out your neck about these people who don't want to come as janitors to clean up your bullshit. And just so we get a clear understanding of how much they are not interested in cleaning up Donald Trump's bullshit, our friend Harry Enton, he lays out the case real well.
Really simple, Mr. Berman. It's really simple. The people in those countries hate the U.S. military action in Iran. What do we talk about here? Okay, net approval rating, U.S. military action in Iran. In Canada, way underwater, minus 27 points. You think that's low? Thank you, Mr. Berman. You think that's low? Take a look here in Japan. Negative 73 points. My goodness gracious. Way down there. How about in the UK? We're talking about 34 points underwater. Key U.S. allies, the people in those countries, absolutely despise the U.S. military action in Iran. No wonder the leaders in those countries are, let's just say, a little apprehensive about helping out the U.S.
So compare this to the environment in 2003, and I'm picking that point because that was the beginning of the U.S. intervention war in Iraq. How did people in these countries feel at the beginning of that war compared to now?
Okay, so you see these numbers are quite low. They weren't always this low when it came to U.S. military action in the Middle East, because take a look at this situation. Okay, shift in net approval rating, U.S. military action in Iran now versus in Iraq in 2003. In Canada, way down. We're talking down, get this, 27 points. How about in Japan? Way down there, down 45 points. How about in the UK? And of course, there was UK involvement in that particular war. Look at that, down 48 points. So what we're seeing is a massive shift when it comes to how the people, our allies, people in those countries, are viewing the U.S. military action in the Middle East. Far less popular this time around. No wonder the leaders in those countries want pretty much absolutely nothing to do with this conflict, because they know there are big electoral consequences if they do, and not good electoral consequences.
What's happening overall with views of America abroad?
Yeah, okay, so you see these numbers, you see these shifts down in terms of how our allies or folks in those countries view U.S. military action in the Middle East. You see how unpopular it is this time around. Canada, Japan, the UK. And this is just part of a larger picture, Mr. Berman. A larger picture. Favorable view of the U.S. in 2025 versus 2024. Of course, Donald Trump being the president in 2025, Joe Biden being the president of the United States in 2024. Look at this. Favorable view of the U.S. down 79% of 24 countries' residents asked. The bottom line is this. The folks overseas are far less likely to view the U.S. favorably, and those chickens, they're coming home to roost in this situation, as there's very little support abroad for the U.S. military action in Iran.
So you mean shitting on your allies, putting an unnecessary tax on their goods and products to teach them a lesson, and then turning around and asking them for help isn't a winning strategy? You mean that you can't just go around bullying the world and thinking that the world is going to fall to their knees for you? When in fact, over the last year plus, it has been Prime Minister Carney in Canada that is rallying the middle powers that says we don't have to be pushed around anymore. We can form our own alliances. You mean that it's like Italy and France saying, we're not going to call the United States to broker a deal with Iran on the passage of our ships through the Hormuz Strait. Actually, we're going to pick up the phone and call Iran ourselves because the United States has shown itself, guess what? Not to be fucking trusted. And do you think that this is going away if, in fact, we ever have free and fair elections again and there's actually a new president? No, because the thing that used to be stabilized from administration to administration was our foreign policy. That is no longer the case. We change our foreign policy whims every few years. So why am I going to go ahead and broker deals with you and trust you when in the face of another election, our deals could be ripped up and, in fact, thrown away? And so take a listen here. This is Canada's defense minister, David McGuinty, who reacts to Joe Kent's firing. But it's more important what he actually says here with regard to, and if I can find it, and friends, unfortunately, I do not have that video. But what he says here is this. I'm not sure why the individual resigned, speaking about Joe Kent, but he says, first I hear of it. Made a principled decision, I suppose. And he says the United States is going to find its way with Israel through Iran, essentially saying, you already chose your ally. You already chose your partner. And he said, as far as Canada is concerned, we're monitoring the situation, but we have no desire to offer a defensive posture or help in this matter. Let the United States figure it out with the people that they started this war with. And then you listen here to General McCaffrey, who lends his thoughts about what he thinks went wrong in Donald Trump's assessment of Iran. Take a listen to him.
Well, that's the option that no one in their right mind would consider, to take on a nation of 90 million people, a gigantic land area, ruled ruthlessly by the IRGC and the dictatorship of the Ayatollah. Who would, in his right mind, would take it on? We could do that. There's no question. We've still got 2.1 million men and women in the U.S. Armed Forces, and Iran's ability to resist a ground invasion, even a limited one, took on Karg Island or just tried to get a sanitary zone around the straits, would be achievable, but it would come at an enormous cost. And I don't think the Trump administration is going to consider it. So they're stuck. They got to negotiate. They got to lift the economic sanctions. They got to get inspectors back on the ground. The only objective we care about was their nuclear program, and that will remain untouched. We cannot go in with a commando raid and seize it. It takes several thousand troops on the ground, heavy machinery, multiple days. That's not going to happen either. So I think Trump didn't think through this thing very clearly, and now he's stuck.
Trump didn't think through this thing very clearly. I'm pretty sure that that's not the first time that he's heard that. But here's, again, just going back to the beginning, which is we were in the midst of negotiations with Iran before the U.S., at the behest of Israel, hastily stopped those conversations that had been going on for a year and decided to bomb them instead. And The Guardian has a fantastic piece that is up that I want to read parts of to all of you. Because again, Joe Kent, anti-Semite, racist, right-wing extremist, also said everything that is true about Israel bringing the United States into this war and that there was no imminent threat. And now we've had multiple, right, intelligence agencies offer the same thing. So here is The Guardian. UK security advisor attended US-Iran talks and judged deal was within reach. Oh, interesting. Britain's national security advisor, Jonathan Powell, attended the final talks between US and Iran and judged that the offer made by Tehran on its nuclear program was significant enough to prevent a rush to war, The Guardian can reveal. Powell thought progress had been made in Geneva in late February and that the deal proposed by Iran was surprising. 2 days after the talks ended, and after a date had been agreed for a further round of technical talks in Vienna, the US and Israel launched attacks on Iran. Powell's attendance at the Geneva talks, as well as at previous set of meetings earlier in the month in Swiss City, helps in part to explain the UK government's reluctance to back the US attack on Iran, a reluctance that has put the UK-US relationship under unprecedented strain. The UK, here we go again, saw no compelling evidence of an imminent threat of an Iranian missile attack on Europe or of Iran securing a nuclear weapon. This is a lie that has been persistent over the last 40 years. This is the first time it has become clear that Britain was so closely involved in the talks and so had good reason to decide whether diplomatic options had been exhausted and a U.S. attack was necessary. Instead, the UK regarded the attacks as unlawful and premature since Powell believed the path remained open to a negotiated solution to the long-running issue of how Iran could reassure the U.S. that it is not seeking out a nuclear weapon. In the final session of the talks, Iran agreed to, listen to this, 3 to 5 year pause on domestic enrichment. But the U.S. in the afternoon session, after consultations with Trump, demanded a 10-year pause. In practice, Iran had again, none of this is being operated in reality. Iran is operating in reality, and the UK is operating in reality, but Israel and Donald Trump are not operating in reality. They are operating under the paranoia that the very presence of Iran is in fact a threat to the security of Israel and to the security of the world. That's the logic that they did here. So in practice, Iran had no means to enrich domestically because of the bombing of its enrichment plants in 2015. Iran had also made an offer of what the mediators described as an economic bonanza, with the U.S. being given the chance to participate in a future civil nuclear program. In return, nearly 80% of the economic sanctions on Iran would have been lifted, including assets frozen in Qatar, a demand Iran made in the 2025 talks. And so here is the thing. There was a deal within reach. We knew that when Donald Trump came into office the first time, there had been a deal struck. He refers to it, of course, as a disastrous deal that Obama had put together, but it was a bipartisan deal that was struck with multiple countries, including those in Europe, China, as well as Iran, over the course of 2 years. It wasn't disastrous. It got sanctions lifted on Iran in agreement to not further develop any enrichment programs. Does that not sound like what Donald Trump was supposedly trying to do in these talks? So you rip up one deal so that you can put your name on another. Goes on to say this. The Oman mediator believed the offer of zero stockpiling of highly enriched uranium was a breakthrough that meant an agreement was within reach. Accounts differ on whether Kushner left the talks given the impression Trump would welcome what had been agreed, or that the U.S. negotiators knew it would take something massive to persuade Trump that war was not the best option. One Gulf diplomat with knowledge of the talks said, listen, we regarded Witkoff and Kushner as Israeli assets that dragged a president into a war he wants to get out of. The Guardian's report that Powell was present during the talks was cited in Parliament on Tuesday by Liz Saville Roberts, an MP for the Welsh nationalist Plaid Cymru Party, during an update by Britain's Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper. Again, it appears diplomatic options were still viable, and there was no evidence of an imminent missile threat to Europe or of Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon. Saville Roberts told Cooper. Does she therefore believe a negotiated path between Iran and the U.S. was still possible at that time? And if so, surely that means that the initial U.S. and Israeli strikes were premature and illegal. Cooper responded, the UK did not provide support for negotiations and diplomatic processes around the nuclear discussions. We did think that was an important track, and we did want it to continue. That is one of the reasons for the position we took on the initial U.S. strikes that took place. And again, I want to lift this up. How did one diplomat from the Gulf view Witkoff and Kushner? We regarded Witkoff and Kushner as Israeli assets that dragged a president into war he wants to get out of. Kushner and Witkoff should never have been the negotiators. What foreign affairs experience do they actually have? Witkoff, I'm not so sure of, but Jared Kushner, 100%. He wasn't even able to get security clearance in the first administration. And now you're out there negotiating on behalf of two countries, one that is paying you, both that are paying you, but one that you have certain ties to, and know that you're bloodthirsty for war because that's where all of your investments are. On top of which, Trump is bashing, right? Continues to bash his NATO folks. We know now that a deal was actually on the table and there was no need for an attack that is now costing $1 billion a day of our taxpayer dollars. Donald Trump and Netanyahu, who, by the way, has been putting out very interesting videos, but has yet to attend one of his own security briefings or hold a press conference, but yet we're supposed to believe that he is alive and well. But here's what has been said. In a brief post on X, Iran's parliamentary speaker, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, wrote that the situation in the Strait of Hormuz won't return to its pre-war status. He did not elaborate further. The effective shutdown in traffic through the vital shipping route has had significant consequences for the global economy, causing oil prices and gas prices to soar. So what are they articulating right now? We don't give a fuck what you have planned. One, Israel has said that they've killed another integral member of the Ayatollah's inner circle. But what we do know is that they have like 4 layers of succession plans in place because they all know that they're going to be killed, right? But you can't kill them all because they're probably all scattered around the fucking country with plans in place of ensuring that if your aggression persists, know that the old world order ain't coming back, folks. They're like, no, we own this shit now. We've been owned it, and we're not going to provide you access through it. So what does the United States have planned if the war is extended beyond the few weeks that Donald Trump said that it would be? Remember, we're in week 3, about to go into week 4. Donald Trump said it would be just a couple of weeks, and in my mind, a couple is 2. So we've surpassed that. But what do they say about our economy and about what they care about in this moment? Just take a quick listen.
Is that the U.S. economy is fundamentally sound, and that if it were to be extended, it wouldn't really disrupt the U.S. economy very much at all. It would hurt consumers, and we'd have to think about, if that continued, what we would have to do about that. But that's like really the last of our concerns right now, because we're very confident that this thing is going ahead of schedule.
Somebody explain to me how the economy is strong, but consumers are hurt and will continue to hurt if the war is extended. But everything is ahead of schedule. And yet Donald Trump said yesterday that he had no idea that Iran would go after its neighbors, and that surprised everyone. Of course, though, it was reported today that Donald Trump was absolutely briefed on that and didn't care and wanted to move forward anyway. The fact is, they don't consider us consumers as the ones that float the economy. They're looking at the 1%, and right now the 1% seems fine. So the economy is fine. Who gives a fuck about the little people when a majority, right, of Wall Street, a handful of families, the Epstein syndicate, are the ones that are pumping the most money into our economy right now? So long as they're happy, it doesn't matter if we can't afford bread or medicine or gas. So long as they're able to continue to manipulate the markets so that they can increase their wealth. He just told us that out loud. So no one has to be concerned about what it is that they think about the rest of us. And quickly, as I wrap up here today, before we go into Town Hall Tuesday is where you all get to ask me questions. So please type question in capital letters, followed by your question. I'm going to get to it shortly. But before I do, I want to bring your attention to the SAVE Act. Trump allies plan Senate floor takeover to pass the Save America Act, because it isn't enough, right, that the Epstein class wants to ensure that AI takes over all of our jobs and basically enslaves humanity. It's not enough that pedophiles run everywhere and run every part of the country. It's not enough that they then rub our noses in it, making our lives more expensive and more dangerous. It is, in fact, the goal to ensure that women do not vote, which goes back to the top of the show. Trump allies are planning to take over the Senate floor this week in a bid to pass the SAVE Act, setting up a major test for John Thune, who is the majority leader, who is under pressure from Trump and MAGA to extend the debate over voting reform as long as possible. GOP senators are playing their cards close to the vest ahead of the week's marathon debate over the SAVE Act. But there's bracing for long hours and possible late nights in a bid to build momentum for the bill. And just to remind you, this bill is providing a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. And no one says it better than Ted Louis. Take a listen.
Immigrants voting in elections, that is an infinitesimal problem. Just go and research on the internet. It is so small. And why is that? Because undocumented immigrants want nothing to do with the government. Because, again, to vote, not only do you have to vote, you have to first register. How many undocumented immigrants can go, yes, I'm going to give all my information to the government that's trying to maybe deport me? No way. Undocumented immigrants just aren't going to register to vote. And if you don't register to vote, you're just not going to be able to vote because it won't match the registration roll. So this is a problem that doesn't even exist. As I just want people to understand that. It's a problem that doesn't even exist, and it's going to disenfranchise so many people. And by the way, the top 10 states with people without passports, all red states.
The top 10 states, people without passports, are red states. We know this, right? But remember, Donald Trump told them, you only got to vote this one time. You won't have to vote again. And he is damn sure making sure that that is the case, isn't he? Because married women who change their last name, guess what doesn't match on their birth certificate? Their last names. They're also very loosey-goosey about the documentation, state by state, and how that will be accepted. So why is Donald Trump trying to ram this through? Because 70 million people will be disenfranchised, largely women, largely Democratic voters. This is the world that we are currently living in. It is dangerous. It gets more and more dangerous by the day. And they're showing us all their cards, folks. They're showing us all their cards. We can't pretend that we don't know what we're up against because, frankly, we knew 10 years ago. Folks just never thought it would get this bad. And yet, here we are. So what are we going to do about it remains the question of the day. All right, folks, it is time for Town Hall Tuesday, so do get your questions ready, and let's get into it. All right, friends. It is Town Hall Tuesday, which means that you get to ask me whatever questions you would like. It could be about the show. It could be about life in general. But you type question in all capital followed by your question, and I will do my best to answer it. So we start here. Question. Have you been watching? Oh, Electron. Hello. Have you been watching any of the women's team USA basketball games? Still wondering if we're going to have a regular WNBA season. Folks, right now, the WNBA season is a giant question mark as negotiations have been going on for quite some time between the WNBA and the WNBAP Players Association over their CBA, over their deals, where they are looking for, the women are looking for revenue share and you know, just to be treated like the professional athletes that they are. And the WNBA is like, nah, no, we're not going to do that. We're not opening up our books. We don't want to do revenue share with you. Maybe we'll budge on certain things, but not on others. And so right now there is a standoff that is happening. Hopefully we'll see Electron. Will they come to the decision table? But we don't know. Question. Did you see Goldman Sachs? This is from Norma. Did you see Goldman Sachs head Lloyd Blankfein publicly admit that societal wealth inequality is a threat and we need to institute some type of public financial assistance to be paid out? No, I did not see that, Norma, so thank you for bringing it to my attention. And, you know, here's a conversation that I was having when I was visiting my family. And the conversation went like this. If AI poses such a great threat, which it does, in replacing so many jobs across so many industries, is there going to be some type of universal basic income to cover the basic needs of people who are going to be forced out of a job and who may not have any job openings to go towards? And I said, well, who is going to decide on basic universal income? Government? And if we're talking about the government doing that out of the goodness of their heart, it sure as hell is not happening from this government. And we know that there are lots in the lobbying groups that will make sure that universal basic income never happens. right? Because we don't want your tax dollars to actually go to benefit you. Because then guess what? It will benefit the blacks and the browns and the trans and the this and the that. So there are so many folks that are so willing, friends, to die of whiteness. You know, it really is extraordinary to me. Marilyn, question. Are you going to watch basketball tournament, men or women? I like to see kids play. I am. It starts today, March Madness, right? I don't do brackets. I'm not really versed in the college space. And so I just kind of rely on my friends to guide me, but I'll probably watch some games, but I'm not like invested in who's going to win out on the bracket. I don't know. Tropical Ding Dong, question 1. Do you have any special picks you want to see win in primaries today? Second question, do you follow Farming While Beige? And if so, did you see their video about not voting? No, I did not. I do not follow Farming While Beige. I will look that up, so I don't know about their recent video. And do I have any special picks that I want to see win the primaries today? I do not. But I am keeping an eye on what does happen. Daisy, are you an NC? Oh, same basketball questions. I will watch games. I'm not necessarily like big into college basketball. I know UConn is great. I know South Carolina is great. I know LSU is great. So it'll be fun to see those teams, but I do not have a dog in any of these fights. G-Cause, question. Why do you think the Bill Clinton deposition hasn't been released? I don't know what kind of deals the Clintons put together, but at some point, maybe it will be. But is it going to provide us with any more information than what we already know? I don't think so. Question, will Trump have the Venezuelan manager arrested tonight so that Team USA can win the World Basketball Classic by forfeit? I don't put anything past this man. He's an absolute lunatic. I'm looking for another question. Question, Gus. Do you like musicals, movies, or otherwise? If so, do you have any favorites? I watched In the Heights today and thought it was fantastic. I do like musicals. And I like going to musicals here on Broadway. I like watching musicals. What I would like to see, is it called Buena Vista Social Club? I think that's on Broadway and people have recommended that to me. But I don't have any, I mean, old school favorites like Chicago is fantastic. And I've seen that on Broadway a couple of times. And I thought it was really good. Question, did your mom make banana bread? And is a paid sub better for you through Substack or YouTube? Thank you so much, Wendy, for asking. My mom did not make banana bread, but my aunt came over today, which I missed, and she made wheat bread from scratch. So exciting. But is a paid subscribe better for you? It's really what's better for you. You can choose to become a paid subscriber from Substack or through YouTube. It's really what works better for you. And I'm just appreciative that you would even consider doing that. So thank you. Susan says the Bill Clinton deposition was released. Okay. And so obviously maybe there's again nothing there. Last question here, my friends. Real talk question. My 9-year-old asked me, why do we need a president? But I didn't have an answer outside of tradition. Any thoughts? Why do we need a president? That's a very good question. You know, what I would think we actually need is a parliamentary style body that has quotas, which I think are good in certain instances, for representation across multiple parties, multiple ethnicities, multiple ideologies, except for those that pose a threat. I would have loved it if we had had that, where people got together, had robust vote and debate, but that there was never like a super majority. There always had to be collective agreement. But when you ask, why do we even need a president? I'm not quite sure. It is a really good question that your 9-year-old asks. Do we need leaders to be a moral compass? Yes. But like, do we then think that these people, are of high morals? We've seen time again that proved to be wrong. So I don't know. But I wonder in the next iteration of America, because we are clearly witnessing the crumbling of this empire, this version of America. I wonder in the next version of America if we will choose to finally abandon what hasn't worked and try something that is different. That's what comes when things are taken down to the studs. Is like, what can be built in its place that actually makes sense? What can we learn from the lessons of this moment and this time and this period? So to me, it's a valid question. Do we need a president? I'm not 100% sure we do. All right, my friends, that is it for me today here on the Danielle Moody Show. I thank you all, damnation, every day for showing up for me and for each other. I want to shout out the super stickers and super thanks before I get out of here. This is independent media. It is people powered. Without you, I would not be able to do the work that I do. So Ernst, as always, thank you so much for your consistent donations. Eternal Energy, thank you so much for the $19.99. Ernst, together, thank you for the $10. BD Mama, thank you so much for the $5. Nicole, thank you so much for the $2.99. Every single cent counts. Susan, thank you so much for gifting a membership to the Danielle Moody channel. Folks, I am currently running a special on Substack right now. If you are watching on Substack and you like what you see, consider becoming a paid subscriber, but know that all my content remains free. But I am running a sale, and that sale is 20% off. I would love it if y'all would consider becoming a paid member if you have the ability to. But if you don't worry. Just like, comment, and subscribe. Get this show in as many people's feeds as possible. But I appreciate you. As always, power to the people and to all the people power. Get woke, stay sane. And in these extraordinarily dangerous times, dear friends, do stay safe. I will see you back here tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern. And tomorrow is Wednesday, which means it is Substack Day. So at 12 p.m. Eastern, I am live with Jared Yates Sexton for the check-in. At 3 p.m. Eastern, I am live with Waj on Substack for our midweek Democracy-ish. And then here at 5 p.m. for the Danielle Moody Show. Find me everywhere you can. As always, power to the people and to all the people power. Get woke, stay sane. And in these extraordinarily dangerous times, dear friends, stay safe. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. I will see you tomorrow.